involved, and we're hopeful. You know, we're going to keep pushing and hope that we get what we want, which is clean water.
Exactly.
So, well, listen, we're going to take a break real quick, and we're going to come back after the break, and we're going to talk about some other issues. That's the one thing. Lisa came into this job, and I told her it's trial by fire because these issues were all the Georgia Pacific issue is kind of coming to a head and a conclusion. We have the water withdrawal study that just came out, and then the nutrient criteria issue, which we've talked about many times on the show. There was some latest developments in that. And then, of course, there's a lot of events on the river coming up, too, with River Month, March being River Month. So a lot to talk about. We may not get to it all, but we'll be back in a few minutes.
In today's fast-paced world, sometimes it's easy for all of us to forget our responsibilities in society. Vital resources we use every day can start to seem like a commodity. Resources like water. Many of us see the St. Johns River flowing every day. Plenty of water, right? How often do you see things like this? It just doesn't seem important in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we waste water all the time, and the world keeps on spinning. Think about this, though. What if we didn't have the water to waste? What if we ran out of water? You would regret not saving it then, wouldn't you? Before you waste another drop, remember, what if someday you weren't able to?
Hello, welcome back to the second half of the St. Johns Riverkeeper Show. If you're just joining us, I'm Jimmy Orth, Executive Director of St. Johns Riverkeeper, and I'm here with your St. Johns Riverkeeper, Lisa Reineman. Lisa, glad that you're on us for the first show, and I hope you're enjoying your first St. Johns Riverkeeper TV show.
I am. Any opportunity to talk about the river is a good one, and so happy to have our viewers out there listening and understand what we all can do to protect the St. Johns River.
That's great. Well, one of the things I forgot to ask you actually before we get into more issues is I wanted to know, what are your plans for the future? I mean, you're obviously not Neil Armstrong, and you have different ideas probably and different skills and different things you'd like to do. What are your plans for the future, things that you want to accomplish besides obviously solving all the problems that affect the river?
Well, obviously all the problems affecting the river are taking the front seat right now because there's a lot of things that are happening as we've been talking about. One of the things I would like to build on, we have a law committee that really works with a legal committee that works with us on all of our legal options, has been worked and served us very well. We want to create a similar technical committee. We have great resources that have worked with us on different issues that are looking like they're going to happen to a river, and we've been able to tie them in, but we want to bring them together and so we can get more folks to the table that look at specific issues, and then also have these folks look at things holistically so we can make sure we're not missing any avenues to make improvements, suggestions, and see how we can build on some of the challenges and maybe turn up some of them into opportunities.
Right. Well, I know, for instance, on the Georgia Pacific issue, that really, I think, brought that all home.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Engaging these experts.
Right.
That really, I mean, that's the one thing I've always said with the Riverkeeper, cannot have all of the expertise and knowledge about all of these issues. I mean, we're talking about you have to understand engineering, and you have to understand the legal aspects of things. You have to understand public policy. You have to understand the science. That's where we have to rely on experts to bring them in to help us to understand these issues and understand the options. And Georgia Pacific's a perfect example. We brought in experts that have helped us, and I think really helped provide us with leverage in these discussions because we have people on our side that really know the ins and outs of the pulp and paper industry and understand how we can resolve these pollution problems. And I think that's an excellent idea to do that for all of these issues, is to have a team that we can engage to help us.
Exactly. Well, I mean, our strength is in our knowledge, and so if you do more homework and understand the true complexity of the issue, how it affects the equation that is this great river, and then have solutions, because it's one thing to talk about, we don't like this, it's another thing to bring a solution to the table, and that's where we can get real traction.
Right.
Some other things I would like to do is give more people opportunities to get out on the water. I've always dreamed about doing a through kayak up and down the St. Johns River. I've never had the time to take that much time off to actually get it done. So So one of the thoughts is actually doing kind of like you do on the Appalachian Trail, where you do it in sections, and we could every year have a different section where we invite our members, we invite the community to come out and kayak that section for that year on the river with the St. John's Riverkeeper. So we hope to get that underway, and that way I can live my dream, and hopefully there's other folks out there that have the same dream of doing a through kayak, because our river is so diverse up and down it, and to be able to see it from start to finish is a huge opportunity that I'd like to provide all of our membership.
Well, and you've also talked about even having smaller little just gatherings on the water, short kayak trips to get to know the Riverkeeper,
Right.
but also to paddle with and get out and experience the river. I think
Exactly.
that's one of the things that our organization, we've always put an emphasis on with our outreach, with our education, is getting people connected to the river. Because if people don't have a connection to the St. John's, they don't love it, care about it, they're not going to get engaged in helping to protect it. And so I think it's essential that we develop those relationships and that people have those opportunities to experience it. I always like to use the phrase "get to know your river," because I think it is true. It's like a friend. You know, when you build a friendship and you get to know someone, you feel a much stronger bond and relationship with that person and a more commitment to
Exactly.
them. And I think the same thing goes with our river. We need to have that same commitment from all the citizens of Jacksonville moving forward, or we can't do this. I say this all the time, Lisa. The river's not going to clean itself up. And the only way it's going to, and our government's not going to do it either all by itself. It's going to take engaged citizenry, and we all have to be involved and engaged to make that happen.
Exactly, and numbers matter. I mean, the more people calling in, the more people that really understand the river and its good things and the challenges against it, that's what makes a difference with our elected officials and with policymakers and with businesses. And that's
Right.
when you have voices as strong as the ones we saw just recently, or actually 2008, with the water withdrawal issue that started back with Seminole counties looking for trying to withdraw water. Over 400 people drove down to the Water Management District meeting to voice their concerns. And although we didn't defeat the permit, something very good came out of that, and that was that the Water Management District, they listened to the concerns, the questions the community had about withdrawing water from the St. John's and its potential harmful effects on the river. As a result of that, they actually conducted a multi-million-dollar study of looking at what the real impacts of the water withdrawal and what that would be to the St. John's River. That study was just unveiled this past week, and unfortunately it was characterized a little bit differently than we would characterize it, and that there are some limitations to the study and that more needs to be known. And so that's something we want to talk to the community about. This point is making sure we continue to ask questions about water withdrawals and not ignore the limitations that weren't quite highlighted in that study, but something we're making sure we're continuing to have a conversation with the district.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is an important study, and was thanks to all of you and to this organization and all the citizens that were involved with it that helped really push the Water Management District and said, you know what, there are a lot of concerns, and there's legitimate concerns, and there's a lot of unknowns that we don't know. We can't just move forward with taking out what actually was at the time. They were talking about a total of about 155 million gallons from the St. John's, and up to, I think it's 109 million from the Ocklawaha, which is the largest tributary of the St. John's. So a total of over 260 million gallons of water from the St. John's River system. And thank goodness citizens stood up and said, no, there's concerns here that need to be addressed. We don't know enough about those potential impacts. And so the study was developed by the St. John's River Water Management District, but as you mentioned, I think the key is that we look at the limitations and we acknowledge those limitations, because if you read the headlines in the paper, it looked as if the study gave a green light to water withdrawals, and that's not the case. It's
not the case, and that's something they actually invested at the demands of the citizenry to do a peer review, and that peer review was done by a nationally renowned scientists and independent thinkers from the National Resource Council, and they actually, quite in great detail talked about the limitations and said no decision should be made until there's additional work to be done. And that's when we just want to make sure that conversation continues, because as you said, it's not a green light to take additional water without further study, because there's so many pieces to the equation that were not in that study. It's a good body of work, it's a good start, but it's not complete, and that's something we need to make sure before any decisions are made to take water from the St. John's River or the Ocklawaha, that study is complete and more science is brought to the table.
Right. Well, what are some of those limitations that were, specific limitations that were raised by the NRC?
One of the things is that the Water Management District looked at just what was under their purview. So they didn't really look in detail, sea level rise, looking at future growth, back-to-back drought events. We know weather's been changing dramatically, and they looked at, not back-to-back, well, we've had back-to-back drought events in just in the recent future. They limited their look at the Ocklawaha River, and they've acknowledged, their technical teams acknowledged they have to do more in-depth research on the Ocklawaha River and its impact to not only the withdrawals on that river, as you said, the largest tributary to the St. Johns, but also then the impact on the St. Johns itself. The historical data is somewhat limited, and unfortunately some of that data is not available. But when you can't go further back in time, you can't look at trends. So some of the trend data is not reliable at best to make those sort of concrete, absolute decisions. And it wasn't ever designed to make absolute decisions or to set a number. So we're working with a technical team at the district, as well as working with their board members to make sure that this is the beginning of a conversation and not the end.
Right. Well, and when something that really concerned me was one of the assumptions that they made was that the water that they remove would be replaced by either restoration projects at the headwaters, which a lot of those have not been, they're not underway and not even funded.
Right.
So they may not happen. And the other thing is that some of that water would come from anticipated future growth and all the impervious surface that's laid down in terms of streets and roads and driveways, and all of the storm water that would run off of those streets and run into the St. Johns would replace the water we take out. Well, as we know, that water, the storm water, can be heavily polluted, and yet they did not look at the water quality impacts of that water. They just looked at it from a volume standpoint, which we think is obviously, and the NRC said there really needs to be a water quality component to this study also, not just looking at the flows and the hydrology.
And that's a very troubling piece to it. They look just at the water levels, and we know that there's with they were talking about sea level rise would actually replace some of the water. Well, then you have salinity issues, which has its own set of issues, especially in the northeast part of the state. And then we know that the water, the stormwater issues, not only is there a pollution element, they're using outdated growth numbers, and so they can't justify those numbers that are coming in to replace what they want to take out, because our growth is not what it used to be just 3 years ago.
Right. Well, one of the things that that I think that this highlights also is because there's still unknowns, that we certainly don't want to take risks with our St. Johns River. And if we use water more efficiently, we don't need to think about taking water out of the river. And I think that's one of the things that we're saying is, let's not let this study also divert our attention away from what we need to focus on, and that is using our existing water resources more efficiently and effectively. I think this is a good time of the year, Lisa, to be talking about this. We're moving into spring. People start working in their yards again. We start turning those sprinklers back on and fertilizing. And I think now is the time to really be thinking about how we use water. As we know, as we've talked about on the show before, over 50% of the water we use at our home is outside the home for irrigation. So we can use water so much more efficiently and effectively, eliminate the need for taking water out of the river in the first place. And that's, I think, a message that needs to be said over and over.
Most definitely, most definitely. We know that most folks, based on research we did back when I was with the city, that most people overwater their yards. And so that's when we have irrigation ordinances in place, so we can make sure we're looking at best practices, not only for today, but long term, because it's all about conserving water, using less, so we can protect our water resources and our river today for future use. And it is all about, as we started the show earlier, all about the kids and future generations. We want them to be able to have this same loving relationship we have, and hopefully we can talk about the challenges so we can limit those in the future, so our kids can just enjoy the river and not have to continuously fight for her.
Exactly. So conserve water.
Yes.
We don't have to take water out of the St. Johns. Learn how on our website, St. Johns Riverkeeper. Right here, stjohnsriverkeeper.org. Go to the website. We have a lot. Click on the river friendly section. You can learn about how to fertilize your yard more effectively, more efficiently, use water more efficiently. We have a lot of great river friendly tips on how you can minimize your impact on the river and do your part for the St. Johns. We're about to wrap it up. Next month is River Month. I encourage all of you to get out on the water, experience the river. There's a lot of great events, including the St. Johns River Cleanup.
Yes.
But the most important thing is get involved, experience your river, and do your part, because it's all going to take us to make it happen, to clean up and protect the St. Johns River. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.